Hi guys, welcome back to Binge Watch Britney. So I'm super excited to be doing the final season of The Reign. So I just want to go ahead and get some points out of the way. I definitely really hated Rasmus in this season, and it was well deserved. Everything in season one and season two led up to this villain era, this villain arc in season three, and he was just so intolerable, insufferable throughout season three. Simone was annoying as well because she was just very naive, as Martin told her in one of the past seasons. But what I really liked about her was that she stuck to her principles no matter what was happening. Obviously, we know that she's willing to kind of abandon her principles to protect Rasmus, but when it came down to doing the right thing, she did not hesitate to do that. I'm also happy to share that, being that I have watched season three, we do see Jen being reunited with the group. And I know that in the last episode on The Reign season two, I had talked about that in my wrap up of whether or not Jen was going to be welcomed back into the group, if he was going to try to make amends, or if he was just going to kind of be on the outs and kind of fade into obscurity at some point in season three. And so I'm really glad that that was not the case. And so, with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get into the rest of the season. Alright, so the five key points of the season. So, for point number one, Simone jumps off of a bridge to escape Rasmus. We have at the beginning of the season Simone and Fee. They are trying to get to the other side of the wall just to see what's going on, and they are able to go underground basically in order to cross under the bridge. And for whatever reason, as they're making their way through the tunnel underground, there is like a noise that they hear, and it triggers like this electric fence that separates Simone and Fee. And so Simone ends up going on her own to continue moving through the tunnel and come out on the other side. Obviously, we see a bunch of buildings and stuff like that, but then we see that the virus is everywhere. We see that it's dead, and so she's realizing that life is not better on the other side of the wall. And so she ends up coming back to the right side of the wall, and she is reunited with Fee because Fee wasn't able to make it through because of that invisible shield that came up. And so, because Rasmus at this point wants Simone, Simone and Fee are taken to the Apollon headquarters so that Simone can have a conversation with Rasmus. And then what we learn from this is that Sten and Rasmus, they have a plan to infect the others. We see that Rasmus has decided to kind of lock himself in this glass cage. He's doing it for his own like protection or whatever. He's not being forced there by Sten. And so Rasmus has this false sense of power because obviously he is a powerful being, but he doesn't realize that he's being manipulated into Sten, and he thinks that he has all this power that he really doesn't. And so what we see from Simone being brought to Rasmus is that he really wants her by his side. He wants her to buy into what he believes is his vision for the future. He wants to infect other people with the virus so that they can live with the virus and survive. And Simone knows that this is not right. And then she also knows that Rasmus doesn't really fully understand what he's doing. And so the plan is to infect people who are already sick, people who would have otherwise died if they did not get injected with the virus. And so Simone ends up going to like this place where the people who are terminally ill are kept, and she's like interacting with them, and she understands that they have this vision or this view of Rasmus that doesn't really line up with reality. They think he's their savior and all of this stuff. And so she brings the girl to meet Rasmus. Rasmus doesn't know who she is. Rasmus is also kind of like scared to interact with her. Simone forces Rasmus to have to come out of his glass cage to interact with the girl and show her what it's really like to live with the virus, because up until this point they have promoted the virus as being this glamorous thing. And so when Rasmus is confronted with that situation by Simone, you can see that everything is not quite as it appeared, and so the girl is getting the sense of this. And so Simone obviously is doing this intentionally to poke holes in what Rasmus wants to do, because she knows that this is actually not the way that they should be moving. And so we do see Simone making an attempt to escape. Rasmus and Sten, they're trying to stop her, and so the base is on lockdown, kind of. They're getting all of their security guards to find Simone. And so we see that at this point, Martin and Patrick have broken into the base or whatever, and they're trying to find Simone and Fee. Kira is also there as well. It was Martin, Patrick, and Kira who came to the Apollon base to get those two out. At first, Martin and Patrick, they go to find Fee because she's the first person that they see when they're driving in that armored car through the base. They were able to manipulate the guards into letting them in. They attacked them, and then they were able to drive through the base. And so Martin and Patrick get out and they go to Fee. Fee's pregnant. She's getting checked out by doctors. Patrick and Martin start beating everybody up. He tells them that Patrick is the father, and they stand down. They let him stay with her. Martin has gone off to find Simone, and then we have Kira going off to find Sten. And so once Simone antagonizes Rasmus, we have the base going on an alert to find the person who has escaped or whatever. And so everyone's basically chasing after Simone. Kira is able to shoot some of the guards after her. She's able to get outside, and then we see her on this bridge, and she's trapped in all directions because soldiers are closing in on her. Rasmus comes up. He's driven in a car with Stan, and he's really trying to convince her that his plan is the right thing to do. And we see him really struggling with this because he followed everything that Simone told him to do, and then now that the roles are reversed, he doesn't really understand why Simone is not following him the way that he followed her, the way that he felt he had to follow her. And so he's really upset by this, and he's really trying to convince her to believe in him, to trust him, to buy into their vision, and she refuses, which I'm really proud of her for doing because she understands that this is actually not the right thing, that Rasmus is not in control. This is what Stan wants all along, and he's just using Rasmus to complete his vision. And so we see Simone, she's on the bridge, it's overlooking the water, and she jumps into the water. And so we see Martin kind of seeing this from a window. We see Kira seeing this as well. And then I don't think Patrick was aware of this, but he obviously finds out that she jumped. And so she jumps into the water, and we have no idea what happens to her. We do see that Patrick and Fee have told people about their partners, and so they're kind of given their own room to share. And then we see how Martin is really affected by what is presumed to be Simone's death, because this was someone that he really grew close with. This was someone that he was really in love with, and so he's kind of a wreck emotionally after this happens, and he kind of gives up on everything. And then one other thing that we do find out is that Sarah is still alive, and so Rasmus is having sort of visions of her, and then we see that after Simone jumps, he like hallucinates Sarah, and we do see that she's actually there, and she climbs into bed with him, and then we see that they are kind of reunited, and he has an understanding that she is the same as him. One other thing that I want to point out, just because I talked about this in the last episode on season 2 in the wrap up, I talked about how I wondered how Sarah would be used, and we do see one point in the season that Sarah is understanding that they want to treat her as a lab rat because she is the first person who has been successfully turned with the virus who's not Rasmus, and so she's really not willing to. She wants to be a part of the plan for the future, but she doesn't want to be used, and in that sense, she doesn't want to be a lab rat. She doesn't want to be tested on, and so I was not expecting this at all. I was really hoping that they would be able to give her the cure, Fee and the gang outside of Apollon, but we do see that she is a part of the Apollon gang, and she's kind of not on the good side anymore. Moving into point number 2, Simone discovers the flower extract. And so we see that this guy, Daniel, is able to pull Simone out of the water. She's still alive. They nurse her back to health, and they bring her to the trailer where she's able to recuperate. We see that Daniel is this guy who lives with his family. He has a younger sister named Luna, and then he has a father and a mother. And where they are is in a very heavily wooded area that is basically a patch of land that is not affected by the virus. And so we see this flashback of when his family first kind of experienced the rain and so on. And so we see that they were in an RV with his girlfriend. They were going camping, obviously, and then they were I think by the beach, and they were outside of their RV, but there was like a canopy, and so they were protected from the rain, and they saw everyone dying. And so we see that they were protected in this situation. They understood that something bad was happening, but they were protected. And then we see this moment where the girlfriend runs off with the food, the father's chasing after her, Daniel's trying to stop it, and then she runs into this building, and then we hear this like loud noise, and then we don't really know what happens. And so this is what leads to them discovering the flower extract and how it can be used on the virus to get it to kind of to kill it, and then kind of keep the little patch of land that they have unaffected by the virus. And so we do see this moment where um, Daniel's parents discover Simone. They're upset that she's there and they want her to go away. And we see that Luna is responsible for her, and she ends up telling her about the flower extract and the power that it has. And so the dad is really upset by this, and he wants to kill Simone to protect the secret. And so we see Daniel really having to struggle with either doing the right thing and protecting Simone or listening to his father. His father is clearly willing to kill Simone in order to protect the secret and protect his family. And so we see him blindfolding her. Her hands are tied. She spits on him when he tells her, you know, what he's going to do or whatever. We see Daniel come, hit him with something, and then she's able to run. At the same time that all of this is happening, we see that Jen and Kira are actually looking for Simone. They're following the path of the river to see if they'll eventually find her or her body, whatever. And so ironically, what happens is as Simone has taken off running, Daniel and his father are also chasing after her. Daniel is obviously trying to find her to help her, and then his dad is actually trying to find her to kill her. And so Daniel comes across Jen and Kira, and they're able to defend Simone from his dad. They tie up his dad and then Daniel, and then they're basically trying to find out more information about the flower extract. And then the dad is really adamant that they don't say anything because they're being watched. And so what we have happening is Simone is demonstrating for Jen and Kira what the flower does, and we see this other view of someone watching them, and we don't know who it is. And so the whole time that they're doing this, the dad is like, don't let them see, don't let them see. And I obviously thought that they were talking about the strangers, the Apollon people, but they were actually talking about this gang that was terrorizing the area and terrorizing the family. And so we do see them being attacked by a gang of teenagers. Kira shoots one of them and she realizes, hey, this is a kid. I can't attack them, whatever. And so this is a huge mistake because what happens is Simone and Kira are doing like a security check of the area, and then Luna wanted to come with them. They sent her back, and Luna never actually made it back to her family. She was kidnapped by the gang, and so they have to then go and try to find Luna and free her. And so what this leads to is that the gang, instead of food, they want access to the flower extract so that they can live a better life. And so Simone is able to broker this deal that they'll basically give them the flower extract every other week, and they agree to this deal, but then they drug them with Coca-Cola and they go after the flower themselves. And so this backfires because at this point we know that they have to be very sensitive with how they move around the flower. The flower has a defense system, so if you touch it the wrong way, it's going to attack you. And so this gang doesn't know that. They get too close to the flower, and what happens is the flower basically shoots what's like bullets at you, and it's really fast, it's really powerful, and so obviously it does a lot of damage. And so the flower kills the entire gang. And we see Simone, Daniel, Kira, and Jen arriving to that building after the gang has already been there. Everyone is dead. Simone encounters the leader of the gang, and he tells her, hey, you know, he won't look at her, and he tells her, hey, you know, I just want them to have hope. And we see him turn, and his eye has been blown apart by the flower, and then he died. And so what this leads to is the flower is dead. They have no more extract that they can use, and then we see that Daniel's father is really mad at Simone because she created all of this, because she demonstrated the flower in front of the people when he was warning her that other people were watching that they needed to be careful. And then she overplayed her hand in trying to be too nice to the gang. Obviously, they needed to get Luna back safely, and so she did what she had to do, but she was too trusting of them, and that led to the flower being dead. And so he's really upset that she has made everything worse for them. The third point is Rasmus kills Stan, and so we know that in this plan to infect everyone with the virus, they are obviously willing to test this on people to see how to transfer the virus, and then how to, I guess, get them to do well after they have been infected with the virus. And so, like, this transitional period, and we see that they do have one person who's like successful or whatever. I think her name is Olivia, and so Stan wants to be the next person. Rasmus is not agreeing with this. He wants Martin to be the next person. And Martin is only agreeing to do this because he thinks Simone is dead. He's given up on everything, and he's really starting to buy into this vision that the virus is the way to go. Rasmus eventually has a conversation with Stan about how he wants Martin to be the next person to get the virus, not him. And so this leads to Stan, because he's watching everything, he has cameras everywhere. He already knows that Rasmus doesn't want to give the virus to him, and so he's kind of like testing him and giving him a chance to kind of change his mind without him having to show his hand and force him into giving Stan the virus. And so we see that Rasmus is still sticking to giving the virus to Martin, and so Stan shows Rasmus that Sarah is being tortured with fire. The virus does not like fire, and so he doesn't want Sarah to be hurt, obviously, and so he gives into this. And one of the things that they learn is that the immune system has to be completely weakened in order for the virus to be successfully transferred. I don't know how he was able to figure this out, but Patrick was giving her a glass of water that already had water in it, and it overflowed, so they were able to figure out that the immune system had to be completely empty in order for the virus to be able to come into the person's body and stay there. And so what happened was that Stan was agreed to be the next person, his immune system was weakened, and so Rasmus was able to overwhelm him with the virus and kill him. And so now we have Rasmus in charge. He's taken over the council. I don't know what their group actually calls themselves, but they are like the main figures, the figureheads at Apollon, who were working with Stan to complete this vision. And so one guy is really resistant to Rasmus being in charge. He doesn't want to listen to him, and so Rasmus kills this guy in order to keep the other people in line. And we see that Fee witnesses this, and she's appalled by how Rasmus is acting. At some point, as a result of this conflict between Rasmus and Fee, he is threatening that Fee will be the next person to get the virus, and obviously she's pregnant, and so this is going to be dangerous for the baby as well. And she doesn't want to do this, but he is forcing her to do this because he is manipulating her into believing that if she does this, he's going to trust her. And obviously, this is just Rasmus being a control freak and trying to control the situation when we all know that he has very little control. One thing I want to really highlight is that Sarah was super annoying for me during this time period of her reuniting with Rasmus, because she was really filling Rasmus's head up with all of this nonsense about him being so powerful, about him being like this king or whatever. And it was really annoying because she was building him up to be something that he was not, but then at the same time, when she needed to keep him in line, she could not do that without challenging or diminishing the kingly status that she gave him. And so I really hated Sarah because she was almost as bad as Beatrice in season 1, and I just really hate it when men get with women like this who fill their heads up with nonsense, and then when you need to bring them back down to earth, it's really hard because of that false sense of power that you gave them. And so it was super horrible for Rasmus to be paired up with Sarah in this particular aspect, because she wasn't able to be his guidance or his morality system, because she was too busy trying to achieve power for herself or whatever. Because obviously, if Rasmus is powerful, she's powerful as well by extension, by being his woman and being just like him. And then what we see is that Rasmus wants to continue with his plan to infect other people, and so he has probably infected about 10 people, but after a certain point, he himself starts to get sick. He's developing sores all over his body as he continues to affect more people, and he's also getting weaker. And so we have Fee and Sarah being really concerned by this. They talk to Rasmus about it, but he dismisses it. He thinks he knows everything. He's lying to them about how he's actually feeling. And so we get to this point where he agrees to let Fee test his blood, but she's not supposed to tell anyone about it. In particular, she's not supposed to tell Sarah about this. And we see Sarah like kind of questioning her and kind of forcing it out of her. And this backfires because with Rasmus agreeing to let her test his blood, he was kind of backing off of his threat to make her the next person that he turned. And so once Sarah confronts him with the results of his blood work or whatever, he's really angered by this, and so he ups the ante, and is really committed to making Fee the next person that he turns, and this leads to her and Patrick having to escape. And going into the fourth point, Martin dies trying to save Simone. So we know that Martin was injected with the virus. He is super excited about this. He feels great. He thinks this is the most amazing thing ever. And what we see is that at the time that he is being injected with the virus, Patrick has that little tracker thing that they put on Simone to see where she was. The tracker comes back online. So before it had gone dead, so they were like, this means that Simone is dead. And then it was back online so that they took that to mean that Simone was alive. And so we see Patrick trying to run to Martin to tell him this news, but he's too late, and so he never actually gets to tell Martin that Simone is still alive. So we see the scene of Martin walking through the halls. He overhears Fee and Patrick talking, and then he realizes that something's going on and that Simone is alive, and he's upset by this. And so I thought that this was really stupid of Martin to be mad at Patrick about, because he made that decision on his own to get the virus. Even though Simone was dead, he could have resisted that decision. He could have stuck to his principles, but instead he made a poor decision, and then he's going to suffer for making that decision, as we'll see in a little bit. And so I thought that he was just dead wrong in being mad at Patrick. And so we see that Martin and Rasmus have this conversation about Simone, and Martin is supposed to go and talk to Simone and convince her to come to Apollon. And obviously the reason why Martin goes instead of Rasmus is because he's never going to listen to Rasmus based on that initial conversation that they had at the beginning of the season. And so we see the scene where Simone is talking to Daniel by this campfire. He tries to kiss her. We see Martin witnessing this. She rejects Daniel, and then she goes off, and Martin kind of follows her, and they kind of reunite. And so we see that Martin spends a lot of time trying to convince her that Rasmus has changed, that he wants to talk to her, and he is being manipulative, I feel, because he's lying to her about Rasmus. Rasmus is even worse than he was when she first talked to him, and so he's really making it seem like Rasmus is just different person, but they killed Stan, that everything's better now, and it's actually not. And he never comes clean and tells her that he has the virus himself. He's actually trying to do everything he can to hide it from her. And so what we see is that she ends up taking him to where the flower is, and she tells him about the flower. And because Martin has the virus, he's actually killing all of the plants in the path that he walked. And so we'll see the scene that after Martin and Simone leave to go to Apollon, we'll see that Kira, Jen, Daniel, and other people who are there, they are noticing that the virus has gotten into the area where the flower is. And so what they're realizing is, who could have done this? How could this have happened? And so they realize that the virus was in the places where Martin was, and they realize that Rasmus has already started to infect people. And so what happens is we see Simone and Martin together. Martin has this episode where the virus is kind of like expelling from his body. He goes to the river and tries to hide. And then we see something happening where him and Simone are having a conversation. Martin is obviously really angsty or whatever, because he's trying to get her back to Apollon before she can really understand the severity of the situation. She's forced in the conversation, and he ends up reacting, and she can see that he is now like Rasmus. And so she's trying to get away from him. She threatens him with the vial of the flower extract, and his body is reacting to it. He has no control over it, and so he's literally about to kill her, and she's trying to run away, and she falls, and the vial breaks, and there's only a little bit left in like the vial. And so we see that Martin is really trying to stop himself from attacking Simone, and he does everything that he can to get to that broken vial and take the last bit of the flower extract, and he takes it, and then he dies. And so I was really shocked by this because I actually thought he was going to wake up in the next episode or something like that. So it took me a while to realize that he was actually dead. Obviously, one of the things that her and Martin had talked about was what would happen to someone if they took the virus. And so she didn't know what was going to happen. So we see that with Martin taking it, him taking the flower extract actually kills him. And so she would be killing her brother. And so what happens is because Rasmus is infecting the others, he can actually feel them, and so he can feel Martin's death, and he immediately assumes that Simone killed him. He has no idea of what actually happened. He's not willing to consider any alternative explanations for why Martin is dead. And we see Sarah kind of trying to have this conversation with him, but he's refusing to do so, and he's hell bent on killing Simone. And so he gathers his army of people, of virus people, people that he has infected, and their plan is to kill Simone before she can kill them. And they all are kind of hesitant to be part of this little army thing, but they really have no choice because they have to listen to Rasmus. And so we see them making their way to where Simone and the gang is. And going into the fifth point, Rasmus sacrifices himself with Sarah. So Fee and Patrick have escaped and they make their way to where Simone is. They find out about Martin and they also warn the gang that Rasmus is coming for them. And so they're able to booby trap the place to get Rasmus isolated so that they can attack him because he's the guy that they need to kill or they need to weaken with the extract because he is the one who is able to infect other people. And so they're able to get Rasmus isolated. We see two people attacking Patrick or whatever at the trailer. We see other people at the building where the flower is, and then we see that they have it booby trapped so that this gate that's on fire is acting as a door to kind of keep the others out of the building once Rasmus enters the building, except for they trick them and they send in somebody else wearing Rasmus's clothes. They're all wearing matching tracksuits, so they should have waited until they had a more clear confirmation that this person wasn't Rasmus. And so they're able to shoot him with a bullet that has the flower extract in it. He dies, but it's not Rasmus. And so this angers Rasmus, and what happens is the gang gets separated. So we have Jen, Kira, Daniel, and Luna, and another girl from that gang of teenagers. They are in this locker room. They have someone, Olivia, chasing after them, and they're able to fire a arrow with fire on it at her to weaken her, and they make their way back to basically where the flower is, which is just in a pool. And so they're reunited at the pool with the flower, and we see the standoff between Rasmus and Simone. And so he is really trying to express to her how hurt he is, how angry he is that she wouldn't listen to him, and she's really trying to like reason with him and explain why she did the things that she did, why she didn't side with him, all of this stuff. And so we do see at this point, there is a point where his army isn't following his commands, they aren't attacking the gang, and then we see that she is telling him about the flower and how it kills the virus, and then he says, you know, I just wanted you by my side. And then we see this moment where Sarah comes in. She had reunited with Fee briefly after Fee gave birth to her child because she was pregnant and she was actively going into labor while all of this was happening. And we see Fee tell Sarah to just be by Rasmus's side because prior to them going to that building where the flower was, Sarah really tried to do what she could to get Rasmus to like abandon his plan and just go back to Apollon. He refused. He dumped her. He rejected her. He told her that he didn't care about her. And so we see her going off on her own, and she makes her way to the trailer, tells the guards to go away, and then she has this conversation with Bee. And so now we have Sarah coming into the building where the flower is, and she joins Rasmus, and we see them making their way towards the flower. Rasmus knows at this point that flower feeds off of the virus, and so they kind of like feed the virus that they have to the flower, and basically the flower feeds on it so it gets stronger, whatever. And so we see that eventually there's this explosion, it knocks everyone out and presumably kills all of the virus people. And so we never see Rasmus or Sarah wake up. We do see the flower kind of like wrapping itself around Rasmus, and presumably he is dead and part of the flower now. And then we see that Simone and the gang, they end up making it outside the wall. We see them in this city that has been abandoned and is obviously in disarray, and they are attempting to start over. We see that Fee has her baby. We see that Simone has a piece of the flower in this little glass jar, and we hear her talking about how Rasmus is her muse to do good in the world, and that he just wanted a purpose, and how in sacrificing himself to the flower, he achieved his purpose of saving the world. And so that is where season 3 ends. That is where the series ends. So, to go ahead and wrap up this episode, I was actually very happy with this ending because we saw that in the end, Rasmus did the right thing. He did save the world. But I really want to stress how much I hated Rasmus throughout season 3. And so, this ending it was a good ending, but I don't know necessarily if it was enough for me in terms of like how they handled the group, kind of like starting over, making their way to a new city, and all of that. And then the voiceover of her basically talking about her relationship with Rasmus and stuff like that. I don't know. I had mixed feelings on it, but I do think that the ending itself was actually pretty good. I also want to stress that the series had the perfect number of seasons and episodes. Nothing was too dragged out because I think it was only like 6 episodes per season and was only 3 seasons. So you have some shows that are really dragging everything out. It's like 7 seasons and it's like 15 episodes or something like that. And so this was actually the perfect amount of time committed to the series and developing the storyline and then also wrapping everything up. I also wanted to highlight this because I didn't talk about her as much. So Kira, who was part of the Apollon people when we were first introduced to her, she was really the only person to challenge the others on how they were behaving. And so she was one of the first people to tell Jen to stop feeling sorry for himself because he was obviously still upset about Leah dying. He was still angry with Rasmus, and so he was just carrying himself in a way that made it clear that he just felt sorry for himself. And so she's the one who really got him out of this funk that he was in. We also see her really challenging Simona and how she acts because Simona is the type of person who wants to save everyone. She doesn't really consider what will go wrong if her plans don't work. And so, as we saw with her negotiation with the gang over the flower extract, she ended up making everything worse because the flower died. And so, the only reason why the flower came back alive was because Martin died. And so, they got really lucky with that because otherwise they wouldn't have known how to get the flower back alive. And so she really challenged Simone on not acting like a child and being more thoughtful in how she decides to do things. And so I was really glad that she was that person to kind of keep everyone in line and kind of remind people of how they were supposed to be acting. Because the only person who really challenged Simone on that was Martin, and that was when he was telling her that she was very naive, but we didn't really see anyone else challenging Simone and really getting her to understand that she wasn't always acting in the best way. And so, with that being said, I'm not really sure who the best character is on the show from a moral standpoint. It could be Kira. Obviously, she had some of her own issues. It could be Kira. It definitely could be Luna because she was the most pure because she was the youngest and she was just really kind and friendly. I think Daniel is a good candidate because he was willing to help Simone. He stood up to his father to protect Simone, and he continued to do the right thing in order to make the world a better place. And so I don't really know if there's other people that you guys would name as the best character on the show, but I really enjoyed watching this series, getting to know everybody, learning more about the different backgrounds people had before the virus happened, and then just the fact that the gang stayed together to make sure that they could actually save the world. I was actually really sad. I talked about this earlier. I was really sad that Martin died. It took me a while to actually process that he was dead, and I wish they could have kept him alive and part of the gang just because they survived all of this time together. But it also made sense that he died because he gave up on his principles and then he paid the price because he wasn't willing to let Simone die because he had no control over the virus. And so he ultimately did the right thing in the end and it cost him his life. And so, with all of that being said, I am going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.